the Stephen A. Smith Show.
What's a king to a guy?
Coming at you as I love to do every weekday over the national airwaves of ESPN Radio and ESPN News. ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance for boats, motorcycles, and RVs. Get a quote in as little as 3 minutes at 1-800-PROGRESSIVE and Progressive.com. It is my honor and privilege to have my next guest in studio with me, as he is every week. He is the mouth of the South. He is obviously a foremost authority on the world of college football and beyond, as far as I'm concerned, because the man knows his football. There's a few things to talk to him about today. I'm talking about the great one himself, the one and only Paul Finebaum. How are you, buddy? How you doing?
Stephen, it is a highlight of my week to be here.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I want to veer left a little bit and get away from college football just for a second, because you're a thoughtful individual. You speak on a lot of these different issues, and you've seen what happened with Daryl Morey in China. You heard LeBron James speaking about it, etc. You've got a lot of people who are clamoring for him to speak out. And one of the things that I always have an aversion to is society's quickness to call upon young athletes, even though he's not young himself. He's like 34, 35 years of age. Not young in terms of sports parlance, but calling upon athletes to do things that you don't call on executives to do at all. It really rakes my nerves. Tesla does business. Nobody's called on Elon Musk. Apple does business over in China. Our government does business over in China. But my God, if LeBron James doesn't speak on this issue, Paul, I don't know what we're going to do with ourselves. What are your thoughts about all of that?
Stephen, I've been reading all the tweets and the articles all morning, and there is a mob rule in this country. And you and I used to be on that side of the fence, and we know how it works. You sit around a newsroom, and you hate everyone who makes money. You hate everyone who is successful, because my first job, I made $145 a week.
Right.
You probably weren't making a whole lot more. You came a few years later.
Right.
I understand it. I mean, listen, you can't be a sports writer and not understand the mentality. But LeBron James is a businessman, and I clearly understand his approach. I'm not 100% sure why he said anything. If you look at Michael Jordan, if you look at Tiger Woods, they never really spoke out. They just kept their mouths shut. They kept to themselves, and therefore they didn't invite criticism. Michael Jordan, the famous line about that he offered many years ago.
Republicans buy sneakers too.
Exactly, and so I don't. Yeah, that's where LeBron and I may disagree a little bit. If he hadn't said anything, if he hadn't been critical, then I probably would have been in a better position with him. Because I happen to know Tim Cook, the chairman and CEO of Apple, and he has not only nuanced China as one of his biggest customers, but he's nuanced the president of the United States, who could do tremendous damage to him and that relationship, because he's tried to get along. And I'm all for that. I mean, this is I asked Tim Cook one night. He happens to be an Auburn graduate. That's how I met him. I said, where is the world going? He said, we live in a global society. He said, you can't depend on the United States. Our biggest consumers, in addition to this country, are Great Britain, India, China, and other companies around the world. So you do have to get along. You just can't be that little, this is not, we're not in the neighborhood anymore where you're throwing rocks at your neighbors. We don't, I know you and you know me. We probably have strong disagreements with the way communist countries run, but that's not necessarily germane to this issue. So my only beef with LeBron is why he chose to go down that road. By doing that, he opened himself up for some criticism, although maybe, and you may know more than I do, but maybe he was thinking he would close the door. Unfortunately, he opened the door wide open.
What were your thoughts, real quick, before we cap this conversation? What were your thoughts about, him calling Daryl Morey misinformed? I took it and interpreted it as, how China does business. Right. You've been involved in doing business with China in the past. You had to have some kind of indication as to how they could react to such a thing, just a mere tweet, because this country very, very well. And so for you to put out that tweet that way and to act as if you're oblivious to the potential consequences and ramifications that will come our way while we were still there, I don't know if the word misinformed is what LeBron meant to say, but nevertheless, he definitely took a shot at Daryl Morey, and I can't say I disagree with him.
I'm with you on that. And listen, everyone knows or has known what was going on here for a long time. And for an executive with one of these precious franchises to do that really did not make a lot of sense. I mean, for all of the the critics and I rarely say the word those on the left or in the right because both sides are being critical right now. To come down on anyone for being critical is ridiculous. By the way, the GM of the Houston Rockets knows the difficulty of this relationship. Just like Stephen A., I go to a college campus every weekend. I may think the coach is a moron. Mm-hmm. I mean, and some of them are. Yeah. But I also know we have relationships, and I mean, I'm not going to just walk on a campus and go, "Your coach is a loser and he ought to get fired." I realize I have plenty of forums to say that at the appropriate time, mm-hmm. and I think all of that mentality is applicable here. I'm a big believer. No one's a bigger believer than you in expressing your opinion and coming down hard on what you think is right and wrong. But what has changed? And I think with social media today, you better be circumspect. You better know what you're doing as opposed to just tweeting because you rolled out of bed and feel like, oh, I saw something on TV and I need to give my opinion on it. His opinion on that matter really wasn't that important.
And I tell you this, too, and you look at the trolls and folks in the media, some other folks, not trolls, they're not trolls, but some in the media that are, they're encouraging folks, whether it's me, it's you, or anybody else, stand up. Take a stand, whatever. Well, I'm a black man and I'm an American citizen, and obviously I'm a supporter of democracy across the globe. Make no mistake. So anybody that doesn't have a democratic society and they're a dictatorship, a communist country, whatever, I certainly am averse to that. But the flip side to it is that what amazes me is there are people that'll look at you and say, well, call them out. Like if you're in the United States, call out China. Well, you're doing business with them. I don't see anybody calling out their employers who you do business with. I don't understand that. I don't understand this mentality that you have to call out everybody that you disagree with. Excuse me, if you got a problem with them, what you taking their money for?
It goes back to the song from the 60s. Freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. And I understand it. If you have nothing to lose, go out there. But Stephen A., I would resent anyone in America who would attack you for this stance because no one has stood taller than you for what's right and pointing out what's wrong. I just think you have to, in 2019, be understanding and be cognizant. I'm no longer a 19-year-old on a campus that wants to protest everything I see. I mean, you do have to try to get along with people, whether you look the same with them, whether you believe in the same things, or whether they have a completely different form of government.
Gotcha. Paul Finebaum right here with Stephen A., ESPN Radio, ESPN News. Let's get to some college football matters because what the hell happened to Georgia? Your Georgia Bulldogs, Paul Finebaum.
Yeah, I was big on them.
I mean, to lose to South Carolina with a quarterback that's hopping around on one leg, I couldn't believe it. What happened to them?
They fell into the same trap that a lot of schools fall into. This is, I think, the fifth year in a row, not the fifth year, but the fifth year since the BCS, that an unranked team, that a BCS, a playoff team has lost, a potential playoff team has lost an unranked team. My point is, you can still get to the playoffs, but that wasn't the question. They looked past this team. And by the way, they should have looked past them. South Carolina has been dreadful. They lost about 4 touchdowns at Missouri. They lost to North Carolina, but they were an ascending team. They have a pretty good defense, and Kirby Smart made a mess out of the game plan. He has had a tendency to make serious mistakes at the end of the game. Having said all that, Stephen A., they got the best kicker in the country, and he missed 2 critical kicks,
right,
including the one that would have extended the game.
Do you believe, based on what we're seeing, that this has cost them a berth into the playoffs?
Absolutely not, for this reason. Now, this is a leap of faith, and I was talking to Dan Orlovsky earlier, who called the game, so he has a pretty good prism into what happened.
Yeah, he was calling the game. Yes, I was listening. He did a good job.
He doesn't think they have the wide receivers capable, but aside from something minor like that, I say jokingly, if they win out, Stephen A., they're going to the playoffs. Here's why. They got Florida. They have Auburn. Ultimately, they'll get the LSU-Alabama winner in the SEC championship game, and they'll have that, which will be the best win of the season in college football, if one of those are undefeated and ranked number 1 in the country. So the SEC champion, even with a bad loss, is still going to trump. You can't You can't pick the loser of that game over the winner. You can pick the loser and the winner if you want, but you can't pick the loser and not the winner. And so Georgia will go.
Paul Finebaum right here with Stephen A., ESPN Radio, ESPN News. Do you have any issue with LSU elevating the number 2 in the polls after this weekend?
No, I mean, I think you can look at the top 4, LSU, Alabama, even throwing in Oklahoma, Clemson. I mean, and you can make a case for either one. I probably would make the least claim for Clemson. And I'm interested in what you have to say, having been there.
Yes,
you probably know more than I do right now. But you could vote, and there are 4 or 5 schools that are legitimate candidates for number 1. It really doesn't matter at the moment. I think right now we're 2 weeks away from the College Football Playoff Committee. Their metrics would lean toward LSU because of their wins, because of their schedule. But November 9th, which is when Alabama plays LSU, it will settle that.
I watched Oklahoma beat Texas 34-27. Interesting game. Jalen Hurts put on the show yet again, 235 yards passing, 131 yards rushing. I think he's the leading candidate for the Heisman. Are you there?
Not totally. And I'll tell you why. Jalen Hurts will not be on a big stage the rest of the season. And as a voter, Stephen A., first of all, let me explain the mindset of a voter. All the digital stuff they send out, all the paraphernalia, I could care less. I am going to wake up on the morning of the Monday that I have to vote and vote. And what's going to influence me is what I've seen last, not first. Leonard Fournette won September 4 years ago. He didn't get invited to New York. Now, on the other hand, Lamar Jackson won September and October, and Deshaun Watson won the rest of the season, but minds were set. So I know that's contradictory, but the point is Joe Burrow and Tua will play in the biggest game of the year in college football. And if one shines in that game and then can finish the season, it will affect Jalen Hurts' candidacy.
Tua, 27 touchdowns, just 1 interception, completing 73% of his passes, and the Alabama Crimson Tide are undefeated. That was Paul Finebaum talking right here to Stephen A., ESPN Radio, ESPN News. Let's get back to Clemson because I was there Friday. Thursday night, Dabo took
I want to hear about this.
Dabo took me and a couple of my producers on a tour of their facilities,
nice.
First-class, all-world facilities. It's something special to behold, some special things going on in Clemson. They went out there, they handled their business. I had to speak to the team. I had to apologize for picking against them.
I heard about that.
Yeah, they were laughing at me. They got me pretty good. I tried.
I'm just glad my name never came up.
Your name did come up. Not during the speech, but it definitely did come up. And here's my position on Clemson, just to regurgitate and reiterate what I said weeks ago where you and I had a difference of opinion in that regard. You're of the mindset that Clemson has not looked great, combined with their weakness of schedule, the fact that they're not going to be playing anybody for the second half of the season. You're like, listen, man, I don't care what you did last year. It's what you do now that counts. I'm of this opinion. If you are the reigning, defending national champions and you are undefeated heading into, the selection for the college football playoffs, you should have a right to defend your crown. That's what I believe about college football. That's how it should be, Paul. Floor's yours.
I'll save some of this because I know we're short on time. But your logic is faulty. I'll be kind. For this reason, they spell it out very clearly that they're basing it, that this committee of 12 or 13 people watch game film every week, and then they evaluate, and then they vote. They vote every week. They start from scratch. They don't continue it. If Alabama's number 1, they don't say, okay, Alabama's number 1, who's number 2? They start over. You vote 1, 2, 3, 4, however they do it. And it doesn't matter in the NFL, and it doesn't matter. And I realize it's a different, but it's hard to take that out of your. It's like being on a jury. And the guy on trial has killed before, but you can't let that into play.
But my argument is you and I going to know good and damn well that's exactly what people do. You and I know good and damn well if somebody who's on trial for committing murder, but it's on the record books that they've committed murder before, we know that's going to count against them regardless of how you're advised by the judge and everybody else. You are to ignore all of that.
Don't watch TV tonight.
This is what you have to take it to. Nobody's buying that, Paul Finebaum.
I didn't say they were. I was just pointing out that we come from different philosophies on this. I mean, listen, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying I'm right because I think it's subjective anyway, and it's a crazy way to pick the college football champion by having 13 people watch game film from 13 different backgrounds. But it's just like Alabama has twice won the national championship, once in the BCS era, once in the college football playoff era. They didn't win their own division. Why? Because they're Alabama. So I mean, there's no way I'm going to come to you and say, "Well, Stephen, you're out of your mind," because it's been done before. But Clemson is of that ilk. I mean, there are two schools right now in the country that will get the benefit of the doubt from common sense. But I just think they're going to get in as long as they're undefeated. I am coming around on that. Georgia losing changed that a lot,
right?
Because the SEC is in deep trouble to get two teams in.
I got to tell you this. The one team I think is being ignored in all of this is Wisconsin.
Agree.
And the coaches in the AP poll, they're ranked 6th. They just blitzed Michigan State 38-0.
They are killing people.
I mean, they are annihilating the competition.
2 weeks, they play Ohio State.
And they play Ohio State in 2 weeks. Even if that comes down to a nail biter, I would say to you, when we talk about game of the year, everybody's been talking about Alabama, LSU. Ohio State, Wisconsin, to me, is a game just as potent as that one.
I agree. I'm with you on that. Now, the one game we haven't talked about yet, and it could be our topic next week, is what happens at Happy Valley. You got Jim Harbaugh back on the scene again, and should Michigan lose this game, they're done. I mean, they're not going to the Big Ten championship. They're not doing anything, and they have Notre Dame next week. So you talk about a 2-week period for Jim Harbaugh. If he loses both of these games, is Michigan going to want to stand by this guy?
I don't think so. He's got to – listen, man, at some point in time, he's got to beat Ohio State. Yeah. And you got to beat Ohio State, especially with Urban Meyer gone. I mean, if Ryan Day comes in and just continues where Urban Meyer left off, I think that's an incredibly bad look for Jim Harbaugh.
I think Ohio State's playing better without Urban Meyer right now. And I'm not diminishing Urban Meyer. I think he's one of the best coaches. He's the second best coach of the last 20 years. But they are playing looser. They're playing faster. And you asked me this question, I think, the other day on the air. And I asked Kirby Smart this question last Friday. I met with him. I said, "Do you have any regret about Justin Fields?" He said, "No, we blah, 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 blah." But after Saturday, that's the question.
Because I guarantee you, Fromm didn't look better than Fields to me.
No.
Not at all. I want to be very, very clear about that. I watched some of that game. He did not look very, very good to me at all. What are we to make of Florida? They won this weekend, too. They're back. They in the Gators making some noise.
The Gators impressed me. Even losing that game, they went toe to toe with LSU. They can match them,
that's right.
And that's where that should concern Georgia when those two meet in a couple of weeks. LSU, I'm not diminishing anything they've done, but their schedule's a little trickier than. I mean, they still have a lot of tough games left, and even before they get to Alabama, they're on the road this week at Mississippi State. Laugh if you want, but it's a trap game if you're in Vegas. They have Auburn next week, which is a team that went toe-to-toe with Auburn, with Florida a week ago. So there's some interesting games, but I will agree with you on Wisconsin. It's hard to find a team that has been more impressive.
Good seeing you as always, man.
It is great to see you.
Next week, buddy.
Thank you.
The one and only Paul Finebaum right here with Stephen A. ESPN Radio, ESPN News, 888-SAY-ESPN is always the number to call up. That's 888-729-3776. Paul Finebaum, make sure you catch him. His show comes on at the top of the hour, so make sure you don't miss it. The Paul Finebaum Show. That's where it's at. 888-SAY-ESPN. Let's get back to the calls. Let's go to Brian. You're live with Stephen A. What's up, Brian? Brian, are you there? Brian, are you there? Bye, Brian. Nick, you're live with Stephen A. Go ahead, Nick. Nick, are you there? Nick, are you there? Going once, going twice. Oh, well, either they went away or something's wrong with the phone lines. Anyway, we'll get back to that and more in a minute. 888-SAY-ESPN. It's 888-729-3776. You're listening live to the Stephen A. Smith Show, ESPN Radio, ESPN News. By the way, do you have frequent heartburn? Like the kind where you have an acid stashed everywhere in case it pops up? You know what I mean. You keep some in your bag or your desk or your car or your nightstand. You have those chalky tablets ready for whenever and wherever heartburn strikes. Well, listen up. There's an easier way to deal with your heartburn. That's Prilosec OTC. Just one pill a day will last a full 24 hours with zero heartburn. So kick your antacid habit.